Opening impressions. That's really what I want to start with the World Series. I think there's the fun thing about these type of games is they're juggernauts. They're 4 hours long. You can break down every single pitch, every single detail. I just want to get your overall impressions. The Atlanta leads this one 2-1, obviously, as we head into Game 4 out at Truist Park. And not, to me, kind of the way I expected the script to go so far. It's been very unconventional in a lot of ways, but at the same time, this is the score that I thought we'd sit at in the series, and I'm curious what you thought as well.
No, I mean, Atlanta's been trying to get here for a while. I think, but the last time they were in a World Series was in the late '90s, and they've been close. Last year, we thought maybe they could have taken down the Dodgers, but the Dodgers come back in that series. So you knew they get to the World Series that they're going to be amped up. And the interesting thing about the Astros is, right, the Astros are a team that they've been here before, and it's not necessarily paying off for them. And they're a very different team than they have been in previous World Series. They're a team usually built on elite pitching. We saw those rotations of facing Cole and Verlander. It'd be like, it's like every night there's an ace on the mound. They're like, can we get 1 or 2 runs? Not the case with this Astros team. They're just trying to kind of put it together with their pitching and relying on their offense to get wins. So I think an interesting dynamic for them.
Certainly.
But love the way the Braves are playing. They're like fun, energetic. That's what you want to see from a team that hasn't been to the World Series in 20 years.
First home World Series win since 1995 did it. Really incredible to think about. A team that has been in the mix for so long but never really gotten to this point has just been incredible this postseason. And I think the interesting thing is that you mentioned the pitching situation, and what's fascinating to me is these two teams are very different, obviously, in a lot of ways. Atlanta is seen as more of this, find a way to get it done, ragtag group of guys. They got the pitching, obviously, that keeps them going. If they could squeak out a few runs here, they'll win it. And obviously with the Astros, as you mentioned, a team that no longer has that dominant pitching and a lot more of the high-powered offense, one of the best offenses in the majors, obviously. But ultimately, with this series and the way things are transpiring here, obviously, for the Atlanta Braves on the wrong end of it, obviously, with the Charlie Morton injury, a very unfortunate situation. But this really feels like both pitching units really just trying to scrape it together somehow, and whoever could bring more runs across the plate going to be the difference, it feels like, in this series. And the Braves have just been on the better end of that so far.
I mean, listen, shout out to Charlie Morton, Chuck Nasty, for
Incredible.
Getting 3 outs after breaking his fibula.
Incredible.
The fibula that he's using to push off the mound with. I don't know how he did that, but I mean, shout out to him. But then all of a sudden, you look at Atlanta, and they've got 2 starting pitchers, and one of them went yesterday, one of them went a couple days ago. So they don't have a probable pitcher right now. So they're really just trying to piece it together with whatever guys in the pen that they have.
Yeah.
And on the Astros side, it's not that they don't have arms. They got Javier, Greinke, Vasquez. They have guys that they can go to, but they haven't been effective.
Yeah, and I think the thing about the Braves, as we mentioned, they have this mentality of just going all out whenever they can to win these games. And you mentioned Ian Anderson going out there yesterday, throws 5 no-hit innings. They allow a 2-hitter on the day, and he was terrific, Anderson. The second pitcher to throw 5 or more hitless innings in a World Series game as a starter or reliever. It's really something that is kind of unprecedented. In his ERA, hovering just above 1, one of the lowest that any player has made in their first 8 career postseason starts. So that's really, I think, they're short-staffed, obviously, but the guys that are here, young, old, and they've got some other AAA guys they can even call on too, feels like they're ready for the moment. And you have to give a lot of credit to the Braves that are up 2-1, despite really a lot of circumstances not going their way so far because of guys like Ian Anderson and that terrific bullpen keeping them in this one.
No, yeah, the Brave pitching staff has been, absolutely fantastic. And you look at basically in every single series, especially when they're winning games, they're holding down elite offenses to not that many runs. Like, they're not letting up a lot of 8 or 9 run games where their offense is just winning them ball games by, teeing off on the other team. It's a lot of, their pitching going down and shutting down deep, talented offenses. The interesting thing with Ian Anderson, I do want to get your opinion on it, is you throw in a no-hitter, they pull him after 5. We were talking about this a little bit before, off air. Where do you stand on that?
All right, so we're going to get right into it here because this is, to me, a very dense conversation about analytics in baseball. And this is something that people have, I've been on this program very few times, but one of the times I was solely because Dylan Balsamo wanted to hear me talk about analytics because it's something that he's just seen the way that I said it there. I'm not a fan, really, of analytics in a lot of ways. Especially, baseball's the one sport I'll make an exception for it. Especially when we get to the World Series, though, I think it's got to go out the window because this is one of those situations where you got to rely on the energy of the game, the energy of the room. And when you saw what Ian Anderson was doing yesterday, yes, he had the 3 walks, only 4 strikeouts. You could argue there was some lack of control, obviously. But when you have 5 no-hit innings going, I mean, you got to keep that guy on the mound. Granted, it worked out well yesterday. Let's just say it doesn't work out well, which is exactly what happened to the Tampa Bay Rays a year ago. All of a sudden, the whole world is throwing a different tune about this, which is why I think it's very interesting in these type of conversations. If it works out well, you're a hero. If it doesn't work out well, you're a villain. And I think, to me, you just got to roll with the dice sometimes and make whatever decision you feel is most comfortable with. You can't just go, both of these actually guys, these managers, Dusty Baker and then on the Braves side, they really pull guys the third time through the order. That's just the way that it goes in baseball these days. And I don't think that should always be the rhyme or reason. And you have to have a little bit more fluidity, even on a day like when it works out for the Braves like it just did.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm looking at a Fangraphs article right now, and it says, in the most 2021 thing ever, the starter was pulled with a no-hitter in progress, and it was a good idea.
Yep.
And I think if you look at it as an isolated incident, I guess it was the right move, right? Because they
was.
win the game, the bullpen shoves, but I don't think that you can look at it as an isolated incident because this is a best-of-7 series. If you go out, tomorrow and the next day, they got 2 more games in a row. They don't have an off day. They play Saturday, they play Sunday.
Crazy.
If your bullpen is, gets beat up a little bit by the Astros because they're taxed, was it really a good move if you could have saved your bullpen by allowing Anderson to go just even like 2 more innings? He doesn't have to throw the whole 9 innings, but let's say you get 7 out of him. All of a sudden, you just need 3 from your bullpen. That carries over into the next 2 games. So it worked right now, but then again, if they get beat up in the next 2 games, I'm not sure that we're looking at this move the same way.
Which is why I respect the Braves' mindset going out there and winning a game and not really thinking about the long term with this bullpen, because they used 4 guys last night, obviously Mintner, Jackson, Matzik, and Smith, all of them going inning, no earned runs, 2 hits, terrific, just terrific. And 1 inning is enough where they can be back out there, maybe even tonight, definitely on Sunday, no question about it. But as you mentioned, for a team with a 2-man rotation right now, this is going to be another kind of opener. They're going to have to use an opener here and there, or they're going to have to call up somebody from AAA. That bullpen's going to get taxed. And the thing is, the Astros, I think the reason why you understand what the Braves are doing, the Astros bullpen, the Astros starting group, is not exactly a powerhouse group either, which is why you have to feel confident if you're Atlanta. If you can just squeak a few runs by, I think you have to be confident that your offense can generate a few runs off the Astros. I think that's ultimately what you need to be able to say to yourself. And then regardless, as long as the pitching can hold pat, even if it's not a shutout like they did in this game, you have to think the Astros are going to wake up in Game 4. Obviously, they're not going to get 2 hit again. So I think for the Braves, going all in on a game where they had the opportunity to win, not a bad idea. I think that's certainly, you respect that. It's more just like you said, the overall trend that this connects to is a little bit more, I think, of the conversation here, so to speak.
And it ties back to the analytics thing of, all right, it's a little bit of eye test and the numbers. Like, if you think Anderson looks good, don't just pull him because got to the 6th inning and it says go to our bullpen here because whatever, 3rd time around, or it's the postseason, you want to get to your top guys. If Anderson is your best option, I kind of don't care what the analytics say, but if it's a mix of both, if it's the numbers say this and you don't think Anderson's control is the best, then I'm fine with that. Go to the bullpen. I just want it to be like a legitimate decision and not just we're looking at the numbers. There's no feel for how this game's progressing and what he's actually doing. Well,
that's the one thing we do have to be clear about. Anderson threw 76 pitches yesterday, only 39 strikes. So he was pretty much around the zone a little bit. Now, the Astros have been chasing the ball quite a bit in this series, which is why he might look a little bit better around the margins with the no hits than actually he was in actuality. So I understand the decision to pull him on that game. And it's very interesting, as you mentioned, what they do in Game 4, because now your rotation's pretty shot now. It's going to be another bullpen game. You're going to need these guys that you used yesterday to get out there and give you a couple extra innings. And the Astros, like I mentioned, I don't think they're going to have 2 hits again. I don't think they're going to get shut out again. This feels like a game, even though the Braves have been so dominant at home in the playoffs. They've been 6-0 in the postseason at home, a really tough place to play, whether it's the weather, the conditions, whatever you want to call it. A lot of energy at Truist Park right now, and they've been a very tough place to play. The Astros have been very good on the road, and you feel like when they drop a game like this, they're going to be reeling and ready to go out and put a lot of runs on the board in Game 4. And like we said kind of off the top, not surprised if they're able to make a bit of a run there.
Yeah, the Astros have shown through this postseason kind of the ability to come back after a tough loss because they've gotten blown out a little bit. There have been some of these Astros games it's been like after the 4th inning, you kind of know the way it's going to go.
Yeah.
But, their offense has been able, just look at some of the box scores where they're scoring like 9 runs. This offense can kind of explode just like that. It doesn't feel like it's connected to momentum or anything. It's kind of like day-to-day basis. Is this offense locked in? If it is, you're in trouble.
Well, that's the thing. So the interesting side about the Astros, only 1 game decided by 1 run in this entire postseason. And where everybody does feel so tight, these 2 teams, this is what's incredible to me. They feel like deadlocked in the series. These games haven't really been close, a lot of it. This was probably the closest game, the 2-0 game that we had here. Every other game the Astros have played decided by 4 more runs, except for the one obviously last night. Win or lose, as you mentioned. So it's really a boom or bust type of team. And as we mentioned, their offense has been very high-powered. Their pitching, though, has been inconsistent at best, and it's really a question of which Astros team are you going to get any given day. Whereas the Braves, I think, are a little bit more of a consistent baseball team. That's the one thing that I feel confident about with them. I think they're going to put a few runs on the board every game, and I think their pitching is going to do enough to silence the Astros offense to the point where it doesn't overpower them. That's why they've been able to get to this point. That's why they're still winning right now. Certainly, Game 4, I think, is where the things are going to tip a little bit, obviously, as we mentioned, because they threw a lot of their bullpen out there in Game 4. or Game 3, already, and the Astros going to be ready to get one back. But it's been interesting, as you mentioned, with the Astros to be such a boomer bust team and to be in the World Series. For a 7-game series, it's going to be interesting which side ultimately prevails. Is it that, the one that's scoring 9 runs a game, like you mentioned, or the one that's getting blown out? I think it's interesting to see which side that's going to fall on.
Yeah, and again, it feels like a completely different Astros team from like the absolute machines that we've watched.
Oh, certainly.
The past few years. This is kind of like an Astros team that it just feels like is just trying to hold it together and like just get to the end of this, try and come out with enough wins. It doesn't feel like they're going into every game ready to dominate the way like in 2019, 2017, even 2018. Like the Astros were just a dangerous powerhouse. You didn't want to run into them at all.
Well, that's the thing. So let's think about the Boston series, for example. So the Astros go out and win Game 1, 5-4. Boston hangs 9 on them in Game 2, hangs 12 on them in Game 3. We all think this is a blowout. What do the Astros do the next 3 games? 9-2, 9-1, 5-0. And all of a sudden, they're in the World Series. This is the scary thing I think about the Astros, is that we might say their backs are against the wall right now. This feels like a team, though, as you mentioned. Any given day can just flip a switch, and all of a sudden they're rolling right past the Braves, because we know the Astros at their best is better than the Braves at their best. I think you could agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's as close to an objective fact as you can get in this sport.
There you go. So I think the question is, can the Astros reach that point? And we saw it when their backs were against the wall, and that really is the thing about this team that we have to respect in a lot of ways. People might hate them. They know people hate them, and they use it as fuel. They use it as energy. They're just concerned about playing winning baseball. So in a situation like this, on the road, down 2-1, you feel like that's the moment things might flip a switch when it looks the worst. That's really been the story of the Astros all year long.
Right, and that's the scary thing, because you mentioned that Red Sox series. And, the Red Sox at a certain point, right, they're up in the series 2-1. They feel like they've got all the momentum. Like, their offense is clicking. They're teeing off on Astros pitching. And then all of a sudden, 3 straight games, the Astros pitching looks like prime Astros pitching, shutting out the Red Sox, who are a great offense. And it's like, well, how did this happen? How did we get to this point where all of a sudden the Astros are not only hitting and scoring runs, but shutting down the other team's offense? And I think that's what you're going to need to see, because since the ALCS, I believe their entire starting ERA is like a 7.3.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're gonna need better than that if you're gonna win a series.
Yeah, and obviously there's some guys in this lineup, Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, who have just been non-factors in a lot of ways. Bregman did get one of those 2 hits last night, but really, you just need to see more from those guys, whereas you've seen on the other end with the Braves, Rosario's been terrific, Freddie Freeman's kept it going, Adam Duvall's kept it going, Travis Denard has a couple hits and homers in this series. They've really had their stars in a lot of ways show up, even regardless of the end outcome, whereas the Astros, as we mentioned, has kind of been up and down. And those are the guys, as we mentioned, Altuve or Bregman or Brantley, Alvarez, another one we were talking about before we got started, guys that you need to start seeing get some hits out of the top of the order. And it feels similar to what we were saying about the Yankees for a lot of the season, is that if those guys at the top of the lineup, those big powerhouse hitters, can get it going, that team could be in good shape. And right now the question is, can they? And that's really what I want to ask you, is in terms of Game 4, if you had to just put your money on and say who you have winning that game, I'll put you on the spot here, is it going to be the Astros or is it going to be the Braves? And one reason why, perhaps.
I listen, I put it on the Astros. First of all, I believe in Zach Greinke.
That's key.
Veteran
That's key.
pitcher. He knows the moment. The moment's not going to be too big for him. And listen, when you get to the World Series, I think these teams have played enough baseball where I don't know how much nerves are going to play a factor, but it does help to have that veteran presence. Like, he's been here before. He kind of knows how to handle the situation and what to do. And again, I also just have this feel like this Astros offense, after getting 2 hit, is going to come roaring back. And it's too good of an offense to just continue to get, silenced. Like, you mentioned some of the guys, and we could go on forever. Altuve, Brantley, Correa. Like, it's such a deep lineup that you can go 6 and 7 deep. And, like, if Kyle Tucker's, like, your 7 hitter, like, that's an awesome guy to have anywhere in your lineup. Like, their lineup's so stacked. I think it's, it's a fun comparison when you flip it to the Braves. Like, the Astros have all these guys. They're offensive producers that have been here for a few years, especially Correa, Altuve have been here since the beginning of this dynasty. You look at the guys that are really contributing to this Braves team. It's the guys they acquired. Rosario.
Yep.
Traded Pablo Sandoval for him, which is a great move.
I have an old jersey of Pablo Sandoval. I should have brought it, an old Giants jersey.
Adam Duvall, another guy that great midseason trade. Even Jock Peterson's had big moments. So obviously Freddie Freeman's come up big, and Freeman's the one staple in this offense, especially with Acuna out for the rest of the season. That Freeman's the guy you expect to always be in that lineup and produce, but it's kind of been the newcomers that have boosted this Braves team and made sure that they've stayed competitive in games.
So we're going to talk about the offseason, or about the deadline, in just a minute, but I want to throw something at you. Does this change your mind? Of the 60 previous times World Series was tied 1-1, the Game 3 winner, how many times do you think it went on to win the series?
I'll say 65%.
39 times. So right around 67%. Does that change your mind? I hate analytics, so to me it doesn't matter. But I'm just curious.
I still have a good feeling about the Astros. Listen,
Okay.
I still think the Braves. The Braves, I think, should win the World Series. I would certainly hope that they do, but I just have a feeling about the Astros, man. I don't think they're going to go down 3-1 like this.
The other thing I think is interesting, too, is a very minor point. The lack of a DH, I think, is worth mentioning just a little bit because it forces the Astros to really put a bit more of an outfield parlay than they would usually use. I think that's a really minor thing, but when the series does shift back to Minute Maid, I would think the Astros are if they can really squeak out one more game in Atlanta, I think I'd be very confident in them taking those final 2 games at home. Granted, though, Game 4 could change a lot of that. Just to throw some stuff out there, I had the Braves at 5, actually. But very, very ambitious Braves at 5 at the top of this. I thought that was just a storyline that was in their favor. And I don't have a problem with the Astros, really, so it was not any sort of a antagonistic relationship there that caused that pick. But that's what I had. I'm going to stick to it. I think the Braves really do pull out a win in Game 4, and I think it all comes down to Game 5, really, because this is the thing. If the Braves win Game 4, all bets are off. Then it gets really interesting, I think, for the Astros if they're down 3-1. Whereas if they win that game, you have to feel a little bit more. It's really that's really the turning point game in any series is that Game 4, and should be a lot of fun as we get down the stretch here.